Before Europe had its mighty cities, its factories, and its wealth, before it called itself civilized, there was Africa, a continent overflowing with gold, ivory, oil, and human strength. But that strength was stolen. Our ancestors' backs became the foundation of Europe's glory. Our blood watered the roots of their prosperity, and our tears filled the oceans that carried ships full of stolen lives. So when we say you are sitting on our sweat, it's not just a phrase, it's a reminder that every coin in their history was polished with African pain. Today, we go deep into the story of how Africa was forced to build Europe, and we begin with two souls, two forgotten stories that represent millions. Story 1. Kwame, the sugar slave of the Caribbean. The year was 1762. On a small Caribbean island under a sun that burned hotter than fire, a young man named Kwame bent over a sugarcane field. He was barely 22, taken from the Gold Coast, what we now call Ghana, and sold like livestock to work the plantations. From sunrise to sunset, Kwame swung his machete, slicing stalks of cane taller than himself. The overseer rode a horse, holding a whip longer than a snake. If Kwame slowed down, even for a breath, the whip sang. The skin on his back was no longer skin. It was a map of scars. At night, Kwame slept in a hut no bigger than a dog's cage. He dreamed of his mother's voice, his village, the sound of drums. But every morning, he woke up in chains, his sweat dripping onto soil that wasn't his, soil that fed Europe's appetite for sugar, tea, and wealth. When he couldn't meet his daily quota one day, the overseer tied him to a post. He was flogged until his cries faded into silence. That same week, sugar shipments left the island for London. Sweet, pure, white sugar, refined by black hands, paid for by black blood. Kwame never saw freedom again, but his sweat, and millions like his, sweetened the empire's tongue. The mother in the cotton fields. Across the ocean, in the American South, there was a woman named Abeni. She was from the Yoruba people of West Africa. She was strong, proud, and full of song before the slave traders came. In the fields of Mississippi, Abeni worked from dawn until her hands blistered and bled. Every cotton boll she picked went straight into the British textile industry, the same one that fueled Europe's booming economy. But Abeni's pain didn't stop with labor. One morning, her two children, Olu and Sade, were taken from her arms and sold to another plantation. The slave master said, "You can cry later," but later never came. Still, every night she whispered prayers in Yoruba. "Olorun, set our children free." Her tears soaked the cotton she picked, and that cotton became the fine linen and clothes of Europe's elite, a continent dressing in the comfort of stolen labor. Abeni's story was never written in the books of history, but her suffering and her resilience built industries, wealth, and generations of power far away from her home. These are not just sad tales from the past. They are the silent foundation of the modern world. Europe's elegance, its palaces, its luxury. They stand tall because millions of Africans were beaten to their knees. The sugar that sweetened Europe, the cotton that clothed Europe, the gold that crowned Europe, the ivory that decorated Europe. All of it came from Africa, and none of it was free. So when we say, "You are sitting on our sweat," we mean every brick, every coin, every crown carries the mark of Africa's stolen labor. If you're watching this right now, don't scroll away, because forgetting is how they win. For centuries, they told us that we had no history, but our history is the foundation of theirs. Share this story, comment "Africa will rise," and subscribe to Afri Facts, because in the next part, we will uncover the shocking facts, the documents, the wealth trails, and the truth about how Africa's suffering built the European dream. Stay with us. The truth is just beginning. The facts behind the pain. The stories of Kwame and Abeni were not isolated tragedies. They were threads in a massive web, a global system that traded in black bodies, African wealth, and human pain. Europe didn't just benefit from Africa. Europe was built on Africa. Let's pull back the curtain and face the truth that history books tried to hide. Section 1. The trade that fed empires. Between the 15th and 19th centuries, more than 12 million Africans were captured and shipped across the Atlantic. Over 2 million died on the journey before ever reaching the Americas. Those who survived became the engines that powered Europe's growing wealth. But this wasn't random chaos. It was organized business. It was the world's first global supply chain. Ships left Europe loaded with guns, cloth, and alcohol. They arrived in Africa, where kings and warlords were pressured or deceived into selling human beings. Those ships then sailed to the Americas, where Africans were exchanged for sugar, cotton, tobacco, and gold. And finally, the same ships sailed back to Europe, filled with goods produced by enslaved African hands. This triangle, Europe, Africa, the Americas, was called the triangular trade. It made Europe rich beyond measure. Every voyage was profit. Every slave was money. Every lash of the whip meant more wealth for London, Lisbon, Paris, and Amsterdam. Section 2. African sweat built Europe's Industrial Revolution. When Europe began its Industrial Revolution, the factories in Manchester, Liverpool, and Bordeaux didn't run on European resources. They ran on African labor and materials. The cotton that fueled Britain's textile industry came from slave plantations in the Americas, worked by Africans. The sugar that made European tea sweet came from the Caribbean, grown by Africans. The gold and ivory that filled European treasuries came directly from African lands. And the profits from all this slavery funded Europe's banks, industries, and empires. Even the mighty Bank of England, established in 1694, received early capital from merchants who dealt in the slave trade. The ports of Bristol and Liverpool grew rich, not from hard work or innovation, but from human trafficking. Let that sink in. The Industrial Revolution, the pride of Europe, was greased by African sweat and blood. Section 3, the second phase, colonial theft. When the slave trade ended in the 1800s, Europe didn't stop exploiting Africa. It simply changed the method. They called it colonization. We call it robbery with a flag. Between 1884 and 1885, at the Berlin Conference, European powers sat around a table and divided Africa like a cake, without a single African present. Britain took Nigeria and Ghana. France took Senegal and Mali. Belgium took Congo. Portugal took Angola and Mozambique. They said it was to civilize Africa. But what they really did was drain her dry. They built railways, not for Africans, but to move African resources faster to European ships. They forced millions into mines and plantations. In the Congo alone, King Leopold II of Belgium oversaw the deaths of more than 10 million Africans, as people were whipped, tortured, and mutilated for failing to collect enough rubber. All while Europe enjoyed bicycles, cars, and electrical cables, made possible by Congo's rubber and copper. That's not civilization. That's enslavement, with new branding. Section 4. The irony. Today, Europe calls Africa developing. But how can you call someone poor when you're sitting on the wealth you stole from them? Every great European capital, London, Paris, Lisbon, Brussels, carries invisible fingerprints of African labor. Museums are filled with African art. Banks are filled with African gold. Universities were built with profits from African slavery. Even now, many African nations pay colonial taxes to their former masters, like France, a system that drains billions every year. The exploitation simply changed its name, from slavery to debt, from empire to aid. And still, the sweat continues. So when we say you are sitting on our sweat, we mean every bridge in London, every palace in France, every monument in Europe stands on stolen African labor. Our pain built their paradise. Our silence made them strong. But today, the silence is breaking, because Africa is remembering. And when Africa remembers, the world trembles. If you've made it this far, you are part of the awakening. Don't let our history be forgotten. Share this video, comment "Africa deserves her crown," and tag someone who needs to know the truth. Because in Part 3, we reveal the legacy and the comeback, how Africa is finally rising from the ashes of exploitation, reclaiming her voice, her wealth, and her destiny. Stay tuned. The story of Africa isn't just pain, it's also power. Part 3, the legacy and the comeback. For centuries, the world told Africa's story through the eyes of others. They showed our pain, but never our power. They told of our slavery, but never of our strength. But now, that narrative is changing. Because the same continent they enslaved, the same people they mocked exploited, and silenced, are now standing tall, reclaiming what was stolen. This is not the Africa of chains. This is the Africa of change.
Function.
The legacy, how Africa was shaped by exploitation. Let's not sugarcoat it. Colonialism left deep wounds. They took our resources, gold, diamonds, oil, people, and left behind borders, wars, and poverty. They stole our languages, erased our kings and queens from history books, and taught us to see ourselves as less. But here's the truth. They could not destroy the African spirit. Even in the darkest night of slavery, Africans dreamed of light. In chains, they sang songs of freedom. In exile, they prayed for home. And even while carrying Europe on their backs, they planted seeds of survival, of knowledge, of resistance. Those seeds grew into nations, movements, and revolutions that shook the world. The Awakening, Africa's rebirth. Today, Africa is rising, not because someone gave us permission, but because we are remembering who we are. From Accra to Nairobi, from Lagos to Addis Ababa, new voices are echoing. No more exploitation, no more silence. Young Africans are building tech empires, creating art, music, and innovation that the world cannot ignore. African nations are reclaiming stolen artifacts from European museums, pieces of our soul that were looted during colonialism. Economies are shifting, with Africa leading in resources like lithium, cobalt, and gold, the very things the New World economy runs on. Europe once used African sweat to build its future. Now, Africa's brilliance is shaping the future of the world. We are the past they try to hide and the future they cannot stop. The truth about help. Let's be clear, Africa doesn't need pity. We are not waiting for foreign aid, because aid without justice is just control in disguise. The truth is, Africa has been funding the world, not the other way around. Each year, over $100 billion leaves the continent in stolen profits, resource extraction, and unfair trade systems. So when they say Africa is poor, we say no, Africa is robbed. And that robbery continues until we take back what's ours, our narratives, our resources, our pride. The time has come to stop apologizing for our greatness. Our ancestors built civilizations before Europe ever saw a castle. We gave the world mathematics, medicine, iron smelting, astronomy, and wisdom that shaped humanity. Now, the world owes us truth. The world owes us recognition. And more importantly, we owe ourselves unity. Because the greatest revenge against oppression is progress. So to every African youth watching this, remember this truth. Your skin carries the power of those who built the pyramids. Your hands carry the strength of those who tilled the land for others' wealth. And your mind carries the key to Africa's tomorrow. You are not a victim of history. You are the continuation of greatness. Europe may still be sitting on our sweat, but Africa is standing on her strength. For centuries, they forced us to build their world. Now we are rebuilding ours. The world once saw Africa as a resource, but now Africa is the source. So next time you see a skyscraper in London, a museum in Paris, or a monument in Brussels, remember this. It stands on African ground, even if it's not on African soil. And one day, when Africa fully rises, they will realize that the foundation of their glory was laid by the very people they tried to erase. If this story moved you, don't just watch it, be part of it. Type "Africa will rise" in the comments. Share this video so the truth echoes across continents. And subscribe to Afri Facts, because here, we don't just tell history, we reclaim it. Remember, they may sit on our sweat, but they can never stand on our spirit. Africa, forever.